I used to think surprises were a sign of love. I was wrong. On the night of my 45th birthday, my husband Alex thought it would be hilarious to give me a fake eviction notice at the dinner table in front of all our friends. A heavy, cream-colored envelope with a red stamp across the top. Immediate eviction. Everyone roared with laughter. I stared at it, my fingers trembling slightly. He thought it was a joke. They all did. I smiled weakly, blew out the candles on my cake, and made a promise to myself. 2 mornings later, Alex received a letter. This one wasn't a joke. It was from my attorney. A 45th birthday is supposed to be a checkpoint, a time when you look at your life and the people in it and ask if you're where you want to be. For me, last Friday wasn't just a milestone. It was the day I realized my husband of 15 years didn't just stop caring about me. He had started to enjoy humiliating me. It was also the day I decided to finally return the favor. Let me set the scene. My name is Rachel, and I run a small but very successful logistics company. It's a brutal, high-pressure business, but I've built something solid and profitable from nothing. My husband, Alex, is a former ad agency creative who retired early after winning a big settlement from a client dispute. He likes to say he's a consultant, but in reality, his days are mostly a blur of expensive golf lessons, bottomless brunches with friends, and luxury shopping trips with my money. For years, I didn't mind. I loved him. I was proud that I could offer him a life without financial stress. But lately, the gratitude had curdled into entitlement. He stopped being my partner and started acting like my dependent. The teasing, which once felt playful, had turned mean. He mocked my boring taste in books, my long work hours, my simple weekend hobbies like gardening. In public, he'd make cutting jokes about me being the workhorse in the marriage. It became his favorite bit. I wasn't passive, I argued back. We had fights, real ones. He'd call me uptight, controlling, humorless. Then he'd give me the silent treatment for days until I caved. I even suggested counseling once. He laughed in my face. "We don't need therapy, Rachel. We just need you to chill." So, for my 45th birthday, Alex decided to chill me out with a prank. He threw a lavish party at our lakeside house, my house, bought with my money. All our friends were there, champagne flowing, music loud. For a while, I thought maybe things were turning around. Maybe we could still fix it. Then came the cake. I sat at the head of the table, a massive cake with 45 flickering candles in front of me. Everyone sang. I felt a small flicker of happiness. Then Alex walked in from the kitchen with a sleek black envelope tied with a gold ribbon. "Got you something special," he said with a smirk. "From me." The envelope was heavier than it looked. I opened it and pulled out an official-looking notice. Across the top, Notice of Eviction. Underneath, in bold, my name, our address, and the words, "Tenant must vacate property within 30 days." It had been formatted and printed to look real. I stared at it. The room fell silent for a moment, then one of his friends snorted. Another giggled. Then the whole table erupted into laughter, phones held up, recording. Alex threw his head back, basking in the applause. I didn't say a word. I stared at him, at the papers, at the candles. Then I blew them out, made my wish, and stood up. "Good one," I said softly, my voice perfectly calm. "Really clever." And I smiled, an actual smile, not the tight one they were used to seeing. "Let me go grab another bottle of wine." I walked out of the room. I didn't come back. The party went on without me. My marriage ended without me. And my husband had just handed me the best birthday gift of all, proof of exactly who he was. That night, lying awake in my office, I opened my laptop. If Alex wanted to turn my life into a joke, I was going to turn his life into a lesson. I let them keep the living room and the laughter. I let Alex have his final applause. Then I closed the door to the study and got to work. Step 1, play the part. I didn't want anyone to suspect I'd changed tactics overnight. I needed time, leverage, and one clean opening. So I went back downstairs with a calm face, offered another round of wine, laughed at the jokes, and thanked people for coming. I let Alex preen. He was smug, certain he'd administered a masterstroke. In his mind, I'd been reduced to the punchline. In mine, he'd just handed me the map to every exit. At 2 a.m, after the last headlights had disappeared down the lane, I sat at the kitchen counter with the eviction notice Alex had printed for show. I studied the paper the way I used to study contracts, looking for dates, names, signatures. He'd been methodical enough to print it like the real thing. That told me 2 things. He'd planned the embarrassment, and he'd underestimated what it might unleash. Monday began with precision. First call, my attorney, Mara Voss, cerebral, relentless, and the sort of lawyer other lawyers warned their clients about. I sent her a note with the photos and the videos people had posted online. I described the prank and the humiliation. After a long silence, she wrote back 3 words. We proceed aggressively. Second call, my accountant. We swapped a few phrases, and then he arranged to immediately separate personal and business accounts, freezing transfers and closing any cards Alex had access to. We moved company funds to protected accounts. I wasn't going to let a temper tantrum cost the business I'd built. Third call, a private investigator. I asked him to start quietly. No tabloid exposure, no cheap drama. I wanted facts, credit card statements, a pattern of spending, any evidence of undisclosed assets, and anything that might complicate Alex's social story. He smiled at the word quiet and promised results within a week. That afternoon, I told Alex I'd be out. I left a note, a single line on our kitchen pad. We need to talk. Monday, my lawyer's office, I left before he could start his string of jokes. When he discovered his cards declined and his phone calls unanswered, he panicked, but he still laughed and told a story about a banking mistake. I stayed calm. I had other moves. The following days were a lesson in containment and escalation. Ava, the PI, returned with a file thicker than I'd expected. There were guest room receipts from boutique hotels, dinner checks with unfamiliar initials, photos of late-night meets. One name kept surfacing. Clara, Alex's closest friend, the woman who always laughed the loudest at his jabs. The receipts placed Clara and Alex at a downtown hotel room on several nights over the previous year. Not sexual evidence in the crude sense, but enough to suggest secretive rendezvous. Enough to be worth keeping in reserve. Mara filed for legal protection of the business and put together a petition. Not for an immediate divorce, not yet. She gave me 2 options. An immediate scorched earth filing, or a surgical counterstrike when the timing exposed the greatest damage. We chose the latter. Publicly, I continued the act. I smiled in interviews when our friends asked about the big birthday prank. I posted a photo of a scenic weekend with a neutral caption. Alex soaked up the performance. He loved the spectacle. Privately, Mara drafted a motion based on wasteful dissipation of marital assets and extreme emotional cruelty supported by screenshots, videos, and witnesses. She also drafted a plan to file to have Alex pay for legal costs and temporary support during proceedings. On paper, he looked rather less invulnerable. Then came the administrative coup I'd been saving for the right moment. Alex had a leased vintage convertible, a cherry red car he loved more than me, or so I'd been told by friends who'd seen him more with that car than at my side. It was leased through a company account where he was an authorized signatory. I instructed the leasing company, citing the immediate withdrawal of authorization and providing our corporate secretary's written notice. The car was picked up from our driveway at dawn. He called the leasing office in hysterics. They had paperwork. The same morning, the country club where he kept his locker and his regulars membership sent him a notice. Membership suspended pending updated payment details. His credit cards, which had been closed as part of our separation of accounts, bounced him at a designer store mid-purchase and at the club's concierge. The texts arrived one by one. Fury, pleading, accusations. "Rachel, what the hell? We're married. You can't do this?" "It was a joke," I replied once. "You gave me the script. I'm following it." Then I turned my phone off and let the storm fall apart on its own. People are quick to disappear when the money line stops flowing. Within a week, 2 couples who'd been model friends for years stopped returning calls. The brunch invites dried up. The influencer who'd starred in Alex's apartment shot reels blocked him after he sent a passive-aggressive video begging for sympathy. Social media, his stage, stuttered. But legal theater needed proof, not gossip. Mara moved with ice-cold efficiency. She filed a counterclaim the month after the party. The claim listed instances where Alex had incurred significant personal expenses in her name, failing to disclose them as separate from marital expenses, and alleged emotional cruelty through persistent public humiliation. She attached the videos and screenshots his friends had posted, each clip a record of laughter, each clip an admission of intent. 2 weeks later, we sat across from each other in a conference room that smelled faintly of lemon and legal pads. Alex had arranged his own attorney, a genial man who smiled like he carried a reputation for smoothing things over. He started with theatrics. His opening line was that I was being vindictive, that the eviction gag was merely a jocular poke at domestic life. Mara didn't flinch. She unfolded her file like a surgeon presenting scans. "We have documented evidence that your client premeditated a campaign to publicly humiliate her spouse," she said. "We also have documented evidence of secret spending, questionable transfers, and," she tapped a photo, "repeated private meetings with a member of your client's inner circle." The room went still. Alex's attorney's smile thinned. I watched Alex's face shift, first indignation, then fear, then the slow dawning horror when the implications settled in. If this went to court, witnesses could be subpoenaed. Hotel managers, waitstaff, and credit card records could all be dragged into a courtroom and asked very mundane questions under oath. Stories people told themselves over brunch could be converted into testimony. I could have asked for pity. I could have hoped he'd be embarrassed and apologize. Instead, I offered him a deal that spoke his language: sign a settlement that left both of us with dignity and freedom, or risk exposure that could fracture his life as completely as the prank had threatened to fracture mine. It was a simple offer presented without malice. Walk away with what you had before marriage, your clothes, your contacts, your ego intact, or we let the judicial process reveal what we had. He stared for a long time. Then he laughed, a brittle, uncertain sound. "You're bluffing," he said. Mara smiled the kind of smile that precedes a guillotine. "Take it from someone who's never bluffed in court," she said. "We're not bluffing." His friends started to call. Some urged him to fight. Others quietly advised that a settlement would be cheaper in the end. The threat was no longer abstract. Alex saw that this wouldn't be a private embarrassment. It could be a public unraveling. Within a month, the party recordings, once his trophy, had become his albatross. The years slipped away like sand through my fingers, and I convinced myself I had built a fortress around my heart. I wore my success like armor, shaking hands in boardrooms, signing contracts, and collecting admiration that never truly touched me. My achievements stacked higher than I ever dreamed, but the emptiness inside me only deepened. Then, one winter evening, at a conference in another city, I saw her again. She wasn't standing in the spotlight like before, but quietly in the corner, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. Time slowed, and my chest tightened. All the buried memories clawed their way back. The sound of her laughter was the same, though softer, calmer. She carried herself differently now, less like a woman adored by everyone, more like someone who had learned the weight of life. I should have walked away, but my feet betrayed me. She turned, and our eyes met. In that instant, I realized the years hadn't erased a thing. Her gaze was steady, and for a brief second, I saw recognition. Then hesitation. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice uncertain but warm. I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's been a long time." We exchanged polite words, the kind strangers share when trying to mask history. She told me she'd left her old life behind, moved to a quieter town, and started over. There was a softness to her now, a humility that hadn't been there before. Yet beneath it, I could still sense the woman who once shattered me without remorse. Later that night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the city lights. I thought about fate, about how it never truly lets go of unfinished business. I wondered if this meeting was a chance to heal, or just another cruel reminder that some scars never fade. I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed every word she said, every glance she gave, and tried to decide whether the universe was offering me closure, or daring me to open a door I had sealed long ago. The following day, I found myself scanning the crowd at the conference, looking for her without admitting it to myself. Part of me hoped she'd already left, sparing me from temptation. But when I saw her again, standing near the coffee table with a notebook in hand, I felt the same pull I once did. My chest betrayed me before my mind could protest. She noticed me almost immediately. This time, she didn't hesitate. She walked over. "You look different," she said softly. "More grounded." I chuckled, though it carried no humor. Life has a way of doing that to us. We left the lounge together, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was alive with lights and distant noise, but for a moment it felt like the world had quieted around us. She walked beside me, not too close, not too far, as though respecting an invisible line neither of us dared to cross. We didn't rush. Instead, we wandered the streets, speaking in fragments, memories, regrets, what-ifs. It wasn't the heated passion of our youth, nor the bitter tension of our separation. It was something quieter, older, touched by years and wounds we had both endured. At one point, she stopped under a street lamp and looked at me with eyes that seemed older than her face. "Do you ever think we were meant to find each other again?" she asked. I considered it carefully. "I think we were meant to learn from each other. Whether that means finding or losing, I'm not sure anymore." She smiled faintly, a sad kind of smile, and for the first time I realized she wasn't the woman I once put on a pedestal. She was human, flawed, scarred, still searching, just like me. We ended the night with no promises, no rekindled fire, just an understanding. She thanked me for listening, and I thanked her for finally speaking. There was no dramatic embrace, no Hollywood ending. Instead, we parted with a quiet nod, as though both of us finally understood that closure doesn't always come wrapped in love. It often arrives in silence. Back in my hotel room, I sat by the window staring at the skyline. The ache in my chest was still there, but it no longer consumed me. It felt like a wound that had finally begun to scar over. For years, I had believed she was the unfinished chapter in my story, but now I realized the chapter had ended long ago. I had just refused to close the book. And with that night, with her words and my own, I finally let it rest. The next morning, I left the city with nothing more than a suitcase and a strange lightness in my chest. The world looked different, not because it had changed, but because I had. Some stories don't end with love. They end with peace, and that, I finally understood, was enough.